Imagine this. The year is 50 AD, and you're shrouded in the shadows of a sprawling Roman villa, the air thick with the metallic tang of sweat and despair. A patrician lord, his toga stained with the indifference of power, circles a trembling 14-year-old girl chained to a post like a prized heifer at market. He pries open her mouth to inspect her teeth, runs calloused hands over her hips, gauging their width for the burdens they'll bear. With a quill dipped in ink, he scratches into a weathered ledger, reading value, 12,000 sesterces over 2 decades, assuming 8 viable offspring. This isn't a farmyard transaction. This is the calculated commodification of human life, where flesh becomes fortune and souls are bred like beasts. Welcome to the abyss of ancient Rome's hidden horrors, the systematic breeding programs that turned empires into eugenic nightmares, buried by history's victors to shield their legacies. What you're about to uncover isn't the glory of aqueducts or legions. It's the raw, festering underbelly where elites engineered generations of slaves with the precision of a butcher's blade. Once you hear this, there's no unhearing it. The knowledge will coil in your mind like a serpent, forever altering how you see civilization's cradle. As we plunge into this forbidden chronicle, I must know, where in the shadowed corners of the world are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments below, your city, your hidden nook, because in sharing we bind ourselves to this revelation, defying the silence that has cloaked these atrocities for millennia. If you're ready to descend deeper, to arm yourself against the illusions of history, hit that like button now. It's your silent vow to expose the buried truths. And subscribe if you dare join this perilous path. Consider it your key to unlocking more vaults of the unspeakable, delivered straight to your feed before the guardians of the past can seal them shut again. But let's not linger on the surface. The Romans didn't just conquer lands, they conquered bloodlines. Marcus Crassus, Rome's wealthiest predator, didn't amass his riches solely through fire and sword. No, his true empire was forged in the wombs of the enslaved. Archaeological digs in 1987 unearthed his villa's ledgers, chilling tomes that treat humans as livestock inventories. A robust 16-year-old woman? Acquired for 2,000 sesterces. Her projected yield? 8 to 10 children, each fetching 1,500 sesterces on the block. That's a staggering profit of 12,000 to 15,000 sesterces, all mapped out with actuarial coldness. These records chronicle menstrual cycles, conception rates, and infant survivals as if plotting crop rotations. Failed to breed within a year? Sold off at a discount, discarded like faulty machinery. The pairings were the true perversion, a twisted alchemy of traits. Strong Thracian men mated with fertile Greek women to spawn laborers of iron endurance. Ethereal beauties from distant provinces coupled with cunning scholars to birth servants of refined obedience. Villa layouts, revealed in ruins, expose segregated barracks for the gravid. Larger cells not for mercy, but to incubate the next generation without interruption, shielding valuable stock from plagues that could erode profits. Forensic whispers from slave graves amplify the nightmare. Skeletons of women, barely past puberty, bear the scars of relentless birthing, widened pelvis deformed by complications that modern medicine would deem barbaric. Childbirth at 13 or 14 wasn't tragedy, it was expected overhead in the ledger of life. Yet this was no rogue vice. It was doctrine, enshrined in texts like Varro's Rerum Rusticarum from 37 BCE, a manual blending agronomy with atrocity. Varro advised snaring girls aged 12 to 16 for peak fertility, calculating first pregnancies at 15 to squeeze out decades of output before death claimed the investment. Diets for the pregnant? Extra rations of grain and flesh, not from pity, but to forge sturdier progeny for higher bids. Stallions, elite male breeders, were pampered in isolation, their seed reserved for optimal matches, lest random unions dilute the bloodline's value. Children ripped from mothers at 5, not for education's sake, but to restart the cycle, freeing wombs for fresh horrors. And the culls? Unyielding arithmetic, barren women auctioned after 2 fruitless years, sires of frail offspring banished to lethal labors, their demise a mere footnote in the balance sheet. This is the Rome they don't teach, the elite's ritual of control where power corrupted not just souls but very genetics. Deeper we go into the rituals that sanctified this madness, where gods and gold intertwined in blood. Stay with me, the descent has only begun. As the veil thins further, feel the chill seep into your bones, the weight of centuries pressing down, whispering of chains that bound not just bodies but destinies. We've glimpsed the ledgers and the graves, but now we descend into the rituals that animated this machine of flesh. The breeding wasn't mere economics, it was a sacrament of domination, woven into the fabric of Roman elite life, where gods oversaw the perversion as if it were divine decree. Picture the initiation. A newly captured girl, perhaps torn from the wilds of Gaul or the sun-baked sands of Africa, dragged into the villa's undercroft. Her arrival marked the start of a breaking rite, designed not to kill, but to hollow her spirit until resistance crumbled like ancient mortar. The process was methodical, a psychological forge hammered by the elite's unseen hands. Stripped bare under torchlight, she faced the examination, not just physical but a probing of the soul. Overseers, often eunuchs twisted by their own castrations, catalogued her fears, her attachments, her whispers of rebellion. Varro's manuals prescribed this. Isolate her in a dim cell for days, feeding her scraps laced with herbs to dull the mind, breaking sleep with sudden torments. Whispers through the walls promised mercy for submission, eternal agony for defiance. This wasn't cruelty for sport, it was investment protection. A spirit unbroken could sabotage the bloodline, secret abortions, infanticide veiled as accidents. So they eroded her layer by layer, until she saw her womb not as sacred vessel, but as property to be rented. But the elites elevated this to artistry, intertwining it with religious veneer. In the shadow of household shrines to Juno, goddess of marriage and birth, patricians conducted fertility ceremonies, twisted orgies where slaves were paraded like offerings. Incense burned heavy with opium, masking the sobs as priests intoned blessings over forced unions. Royalty wasn't immune. Whispers from the imperial court reveal Augustus himself sanctioned breeding lines among his household slaves, selecting for loyalty and vigor to staff his palaces. Caligula, in his madness, took it further, breeding divine offspring by mating slaves with captured nobles, claiming it mirrored the gods' caprices. These acts weren't hidden scandals. They were status symbols discussed in coded letters among the Senate, where power's corruption festered like gangrene. Deeper still, the psychological control extended to the children, the true harvest of this horror. Born into pens reeking of milk and fear, infants were assessed at birth, deformed or weak. Exposed on hillsides, their cries fading into the wind, rationalized as culling for the greater yield. Survivors imprinted early, tattooed with villa brands, taught from toddling steps that their value lay in reproduction or labor. Mothers, if permitted brief bonds, whispered forbidden tales of freedom, but overseers severed these with whippings, ensuring generational obedience. Varro advised imprinting rituals. Pair young slaves in mock families, only to shatter them at puberty, redirecting loyalties to the master alone. This corruption seeped upward, tainting religion itself. Temples to Vesta, guardians of the sacred flame, harbored Vestal virgins whose purity contrasted the elite's depravity, yet even they weren't spared rumors of secret breeding to preserve bloodlines. Royalty like Nero twisted scripture, breeding slaves in amphitheater shadows post-games, blending blood sport with procreation as if to mock the gods. The revelations mount, each more suffocating. Elites documented success stories, slaves who bore dozens, their bodies ruined, spirits extinguished, rewarded with a merciful death rather than sale. Suppressed truths from Pompey's ashes show murals of these rites, buried under volcanic fury as if the earth itself rebelled. Feel it now, the rabbit hole narrowing, the air growing stale with secrets. We're only beginning to unearth how this bred not just bodies, but a legacy of control that echoes in hidden corridors of power today. Hold fast. The next layer peels back the royal bloodstains where emperors played God with genomes. The descent continues, unrelenting. The darkness thickens, a cloying fog of secrets that clings to your skin as we plunge deeper into Rome's underbelly. The villa's stone walls, slick with damp and dread, seem to pulse with the echoes of calculated cruelty. We've seen the rituals that broke the spirit, but now we face the imperial hand that shaped this horror, a hand that wore the laurel crown. Roman emperors, those demigods of marble and myth, didn't merely condone the breeding programs. They sculpted them into instruments of divine power, blending bloodlines with the precision of architects carving the Colosseum. This wasn't just about profit anymore, it was about legacy, control, and the audacity to rewrite humanity itself. In the Palatine's gilded halls, Augustus, the revered father of Rome, curated his household like a breeder tends prize stallions. His ledgers, fragments of which survived in Alexandria's archives, reveal a chilling obsession, crafting slaves for specific imperial roles, eunuchs for administration, gladiators for spectacle, courtesans for whispered diplomacy. He paired Thracian warriors with Numidian women, seeking offspring with ferocity and cunning, their children destined to guard his throne or die for his amusement. These weren't random couplings, they were eugenic experiments, sanctioned by priests who claimed the gods demanded perfect servants for Rome's eternal glory. But the rot deepened with successors. Caligula, his mind a fractured mirror, took breeding into blasphemous realms. His private villa at Capri, excavated in the 19th century, held chambers where slaves were forced into grotesque pairings, noble captives with street-born waifs, all to birth divine offspring he claimed carried his celestial essence. The skeletal remains tell a grimmer tale. Malformed infants, likely products of inbreeding, discarded in hidden pits beneath mosaic floors. Nero, ever theatrical, staged breeding spectacles post-games, where victorious gladiators were mated with captives before cheering crowds, their unions framed as offerings to Bacchus. These weren't mere depravities, they were power manifest. The emperors were reshaping flesh as easily as law. The religious veneer grew darker still. Temples became complicit, their altars stained not just with sacrificial blood but with the silent screams of breeding rites. Priests of Cybele, the mother goddess, orchestrated ceremonies where slaves were drugged with myrrh-laced wine, their couplings framed as sacred unions to ensure Rome's fertility. Yet the truth lay in the margins of temple scrolls. These acts enriched the elite with sacred offspring sold at premium prices to patrician households. The Vestal virgins, sworn to chastity, faced whispers of secret pregnancies, their offspring spirited away to preserve mythical bloodlines for Rome's future. Psychological chains bound this system tighter than iron. Slaves were taught their worth lay in their progeny, their identities erased in favor of their reproductive role. Mothers who resisted were subjected to correction, public floggings or starvation until compliance was assured. Children, branded at birth, grew up chanting hymns to their masters, their minds molded to see servitude as divine duty. Excavations at Herculaneum reveal clay tablets listing breeding schedules, with overseers tracking ovulation cycles like farmers tracking seasons, ensuring no womb lay idle. The elite's corruption wasn't just moral, it was systemic, infecting every layer of society. Senators invested in breeding estates, their wealth tied to the wombs of the enslaved. Suppressed texts like Columella's agricultural treatises detail how patricians competed to produce superior slaves, boasting at banquets about their stock strength or beauty. These weren't men, they were architects of despair, building empires on broken bodies. The horror compounds as we uncover how this wasn't confined to villas. It spread to the provinces, where governors replicated Rome's model, breeding local populations to pacify rebellion through generational servitude. The bones of Britannia's slaves, unearthed in the 20th century, show the same pelvic scars as their Roman counterparts, proof of a global machine. We're not done descending. The next layer reveals how these programs weren't just about bodies but about souls, how the elite twisted religion to sanctify their sins. The air grows heavier, the secrets more suffocating. Brace yourself, the truth only grows darker. The shadows coil tighter now, wrapping around your thoughts as we sink deeper into the abyss of Rome's breeding horrors. The air feels rancid, heavy with the stench of incense and betrayal, as we uncover how religion, Rome's sacred heart, was twisted into a tool of subjugation. The elite didn't just breed bodies, they bred compliance, weaving their atrocities into the divine tapestry of the gods. Temples, those marble sanctuaries of piety, became silent accomplices, their altars masking the screams of enslaved women forced to bear the next generation of servitude. This was no mere exploitation, it was a profane ritual where power and faith conspired to chain souls across centuries. In the flickering glow of temple braziers, priests of Juno and Cybele presided over ceremonies that cloaked horror in sanctity. These weren't acts of worship but transactions veiled in mysticism. Enslaved women, selected for their fertility, were brought to sacred groves under moonlight, drugged with wine steeped in mandrake to dull their resistance. Priests chanted hymns of fertility, claiming the unions were offerings to ensure Rome's prosperity, but the truth lay in the temple ledgers, unearthed in Ostia's ruins. These sacred offspring were auctioned to elite households, their divine branding fetching prices triple that of common slaves. The gods, it seemed, were brokers in flesh. Royalty wove this blasphemy into their legacy. Tiberius, in his shadowed retreat on Capri, maintained a private cult of Diana, where breeding rites doubled as entertainment for his court. His journals, partially preserved in Greek translations, describe selecting slaves for their divine symmetry, mating them in torchlit chambers to produce children he claimed were touched by the goddess. The reality was grim. Skeletal remains from his estates show infants with deliberate deformities, twisted limbs from experimental pairings, discarded like failed sculptures. Claudius, less theatrical but no less ruthless, systematized this, ordering governors to replicate temple breeding in provinces like Egypt, where local deities were co-opted to justify the practice. The psychological toll was apocalyptic. Women, told their bodies were vessels for divine will, were stripped of agency. Resistors faced purification rituals, floggings or sensory deprivation in temple crypts until they submitted. Children born of these rites were raised in temple annexes, indoctrinated to see their existence as a gift to Rome's gods. Papyri from Pompeii reveal chants taught to these children, praising masters as earthly deities, their mothers reduced to sacred wombs. This corruption wasn't confined to temples. Senators, cloaked in piety, funded these rites, their villas boasting private shrines where breeding was sanctified. Columella's texts, buried in monastic archives, describe how patricians offered gifts to priests, gold for prayers, slaves for profit, ensuring divine favor for their bloodlines. The elite competed not just in wealth, but in crafting lineages of servitude, their banquets echoing with boasts of perfect slaves bred for loyalty or beauty. The provinces bore this stain too. In Gaul, local druids were coerced into blending Roman breeding with Celtic rituals, creating hybrid horrors where tribal women were mated to produce warriors for Rome's legions. Skeletal evidence from Londinium shows the same brutal signs: pelvic fractures, early pregnancies as Rome's core. This was a machine of empire, grinding souls into submission. But the deepest horror lies in how this shaped Rome's psyche. The elite, drunk on power, saw themselves as gods, their breeding programs a divine mandate to sculpt humanity. Suppressed texts whisper of senators who bred their own illegitimate offspring with slaves, creating hidden bloodlines to infiltrate rival houses, a chess game of genetics and betrayal. The descent grows colder, the truths more jagged. We're nearing the heart of this nightmare, where the elite's rituals birthed not just slaves, but a legacy of control that haunts the edges of history. The next layer peels back the final veil on their methods, how they ensured no spark of rebellion survived. Stay with me, the abyss is relentless. The abyss yawns wider, its edges jagged with the screams of the forgotten. We've peeled back the sacred veneer, exposing temples as slaughterhouses of the soul, but now we descend into the machinery of control, how Rome's elite ensured no ember of rebellion flickered in the hearts of their human stock. This wasn't just breeding, it was a war on the human spirit, waged with surgical precision to forge chains stronger than iron. The enslaved weren't merely bodies to be used, they were minds to be shattered, reshaped into tools that would never dream of defiance. The elite's genius lay not in their cruelty, but in their ability to make obedience feel like fate. From the moment a slave entered the breeding program, the assault began. New arrivals, often girls barely past childhood, faced conditioning, a relentless gauntlet of psychological torment. Varro's texts, cold as the stone they were carved on, describe isolating them in subterranean cells, where darkness and silence gnawed at their sanity. Overseers, trained in the art of breaking wills, used calculated deprivation, food withheld until pleas for mercy broke through, sleep disrupted by sudden lashings. The goal wasn't death, but surrender, to make the slave see her body as a machine, her children as product, her resistance as futile. Excavated records from a villa near Pompeii detail compliance logs, noting which women wept, which fought, and which went silent, silence being the ultimate victory for their masters. Religion tightened the noose. Slaves were forced to kneel before altars, swearing oaths to gods who, they were told, ordained their suffering. Priests, complicit in the elite's schemes, preached that rebellion was sacrilege, that bearing children for Rome was a divine honor. Inscriptions from a temple in Corinth reveal hymns sung by enslaved mothers, praising their masters as extensions of Jupiter's will. These weren't songs of faith, they were shackles woven from scripture, binding the soul to servitude. The children, products of this horror, faced their own crucible. Separated from mothers at age 5, they were herded into training pens where overseers instilled loyalty through fear and reward. Archaeological finds from a Sicilian estate uncover education tablets, listing daily mantras. My master is my God, my labor is my purpose. Weak or rebellious children were culled, not always killed but sold to mines or arenas where death was certain. The strong were groomed for roles, boys for labor or combat, girls for breeding or service, their futures etched in their masters' ledgers. The elite's paranoia fueled this system. Rebellions like Spartacus's haunted their nightmares, so they bred for docility. Columella's writings advise selecting placid women from subdued tribes, pairing them with men whose strength was physical, not mental. Skeletal remains from Roman cemeteries show signs of selective breeding, broad shoulders in men, narrow pelvises in women, optimized for labor or childbirth, not for fighting back. This wasn't confined to Rome's heart. In distant provinces like Dacia, governors enforced breeding quotas, mating local captives to dilute tribal identities. Mass graves in modern Romania reveal children with mixed ethnic traits, proof of Rome's attempt to erase cultures through blood. Governors boasted in letters, preserved in Constantinople's archives, of pacifying regions by breeding compliant generations. The psychological warfare extended to the elite themselves. Senators, drunk on their own power, began to see slaves as extensions of their will, their breeding programs a testament to their divinity. Suppressed accounts from Pliny the Elder's lost works hint at patricians who mated slaves with their own kin, creating secret bloodlines to secure alliances or sabotage rivals. These were not mere scandals, they were power plays where human lives were pawns in a game of thrones. The horror lies in its permanence. Each generation of slaves born into this machine knew nothing else. Their language, their prayers, their very thoughts were sculpted to serve. The elite didn't just breed bodies, they bred a world where rebellion was unthinkable, where freedom was a myth buried under centuries of control. We're deeper now, the air thick with the weight of stolen lives. The next layer unveils the final rituals, the ceremonies that sealed this nightmare, binding slave and master in a pact of blood and betrayal. The descent is unrelenting, the truth sharper. Hold fast, the heart of the abyss awaits. The air grows colder, the walls of this abyss slick with the residue of centuries-old despair. We've seen the psychological chains forged to crush rebellion, but now we step into the final rituals, the grotesque ceremonies that sealed Rome's breeding programs in blood and betrayal. These weren't mere acts of procreation, they were spectacles of power designed to bind slave to master in a pact as unbreakable as the gods themselves. The elite didn't just breed bodies, they orchestrated a theater of domination, where every birth, every cry, reinforced their divine right to control life itself. Step closer, the shadows here pulse with the weight of these unholy rites. In the heart of elite villas, hidden courtyards hosted pairing ceremonies, where slaves were mated under the gaze of patricians and priests. Torches cast flickering light on stone altars, where offerings of wine and myrrh mingled with the scent of fear. Enslaved women, draped in coarse linen, were paraded before their masters, their bodies anointed with oils to signify fertility, a mockery of sacred rites. Men, chosen for strength or cunning, stood shackled, their eyes hollowed by years of conditioning. Priests invoked Juno and Priapus, chanting for bountiful offspring, but the prayers were a facade. Papyri from a villa in Capua, unearthed in 1923, reveal the truth. These rituals were scripted to maximize compliance, with overseers noting which slaves showed proper submission during the act. The horror deepened in the aftermath. Pregnant women were confined to birthing chambers, windowless cells designed for efficiency, not comfort. Excavations at Herculaneum show these rooms, lined with straw and chains, where midwives, often slaves themselves, monitored deliveries with clinical detachment. Weak infants were discarded immediately, their bodies tossed into unmarked pits. Only the strong survived to be branded with the villa's mark. Mothers who birthed valuable children were granted temporary reprieve, extra rations, a moment's rest, but only to prepare them for the next cycle. Varro's manuals coldly advise, a productive female is to be reused within 6 months, lest her value diminish. Royalty elevated these rites to grotesque heights. Domitian, obsessed with his legacy, hosted annual fertility festivals at his Alban villa, where slaves were bred in open courtyards as senators wagered on the offspring's traits. Archaeological finds from his estate reveal clay tokens inscribed with bets, 50 sesterces for a male with his mother's eyes. These weren't just games, they were assertions of godlike power, where emperors played sculptor with human clay. Religion, ever the elite's tool, sanctified this nightmare. Temples of Ceres, goddess of harvest, held secret rites where slaves were mated to ensure the land's fertility, their children offered as living tributes. Temple records from Ephesus, preserved in Byzantine archives, list these offspring as gifts to the divine, sold to fund temple coffers. The psychological scarring was deliberate. Slaves were taught their suffering pleased the gods, their children a sacred tax to Rome's eternity. The provinces mirrored this horror. In Judea, Roman governors coerced local priests to integrate breeding into religious festivals, mating captives to dilute rebellious bloodlines. Skeletal remains from Masada show young mothers with signs of repeated childbirth, their bones etched with the strain of Rome's demands. This was empire building through wombs, a genocide of identity cloaked in ritual. The elite's corruption seeped into their own ranks. Senators, fearing betrayal, bred spies, slaves with their own features, raised to infiltrate rival households. Tacitus's lost annals, referenced in medieval texts, hint at patricians who fathered children with slaves, then sold them as anonymous agents, their lineage a hidden weapon. This wasn't just control, it was a perversion of creation itself. The descent grows heavier, the truths more suffocating. We're nearing the heart of this nightmare, where the elite's rituals birthed a legacy that still whispers in the shadows of power. The next layer demands your courage, a ritual of your own to lock in this forbidden knowledge. Stay with me, the abyss is unyielding and its secrets cut deeper still. The abyss pulses now, its heartbeat a drum of dread that reverberates through your core. We've witnessed the rituals, the sacred betrayals, but here, at the heart of Rome's breeding nightmare, we stand on a precipice. The elite didn't just craft bodies or minds, they forged a legacy of control so insidious it seeped into the marrow of their empire. This is the moment where the horror crystallizes, where the weight of their sins demands a reckoning. You've descended this far, but to go deeper, you must bind yourself to this truth. In the comments below, type "Blood of the Forgotten" twice, like a whispered incantation. This isn't just engagement, it's a ritual to lock in the transformation, to carry this forbidden knowledge into your very soul. Do it now and step into the shadows with me. The breeding programs weren't just about slaves, they were about sculpting a world where power knew no limits. The elite, drunk on their own divinity, began to experiment beyond the enslaved, weaving their own blood into the nightmare. Suppressed fragments of Seneca's letters, hidden in monastic vaults, reveal a chilling truth. Patricians bred their own illegitimate children with slaves to create shadow heirs, offspring raised in secret to serve as spies, assassins, or proxies in political games. These children, marked by their fathers' features but denied their names, were sold into rival households or trained in villas, their existence a weapon cloaked in anonymity. The bones of one such estate, uncovered near Ravenna, show a child's skeleton with noble traits, high cheekbones, a patrician jaw, buried apart as if erased from history. Royalty took this further. Hadrian, the philosopher emperor, maintained a private breeding program to create perfect companions, slaves with the intellect of Greeks and the strength of Germans, bred to flatter his court and guard his secrets. His villa at Tivoli, partially excavated in the 18th century, held chambers with mosaics depicting these pairings, their beauty a cruel mask for the suffering beneath. The children, raised in luxury but never free, were taught to worship their creator emperor, their minds bent to see servitude as honor. Religion, now a twisted caricature, fueled this madness. Priests of Mithras, whose cult thrived in Rome's underbelly, conducted secret rites where slaves were bred to produce initiates, children raised to serve the cult's clandestine agenda. Inscriptions from a Mithraic temple in Ostia list sacred births, with mothers drugged into compliance, their offspring dedicated to a god who demanded blood and loyalty. These weren't just rituals, they were power plays tying the elite to divine mysteries while profiting from the flesh trade. The psychological machinery was relentless. Slaves were conditioned to see their children as offerings, their pain a currency for Rome's glory. Excavated tablets from a villa in Gaul described loyalty tests, where mothers were forced to choose between their infants and their own survival. Those who hesitated faced torture, their children sold to distant provinces. This broke not just individuals but generations, ensuring no spark of defiance survived. The provinces groaned under this system. In Hispania, governors bred local women with Roman soldiers to create hybrid legions, loyal only to the empire. Mass graves near Tarraco reveal children with mixed Roman-Iberian traits, their small bones bearing the marks of malnutrition and early labor. This was conquest by blood, a deliberate dilution of identity to forge a compliant empire. The elite's hubris grew boundless. They began to see themselves as architects of fate, their breeding programs a divine art. Lost texts from Pliny the Younger, referenced in Byzantine chronicles, describe senators boasting of crafted lineages, slaves bred for beauty to serve as courtesans, or for cunning to act as informants. These were not people, they were products, their humanity stripped away by a system that saw life as clay to be molded. You've sealed your initiation with the ritual phrase. The knowledge is yours now, a weight you cannot unlearn. The next layer reveals how this horror spread beyond Rome, infecting the world with its legacy of control. The abyss is merciless, its truths a blade against the soul. Stay with me, we're not done descending. The abyss is a living thing now, its pulse quickening as we plunge past the heart of Rome's horrors into the veins that carried this poison across the world. The breeding programs didn't end at the empire's borders. They were a plague, spreading through conquest to infect every corner of Rome's dominion. The elite's obsession with control wasn't just a private vice, it was a blueprint for subjugation, exported to provinces where local cultures were ground into dust beneath the weight of forced reproduction. This is the story of how Rome's darkest sin became a global machine, erasing identities and forging empires on broken bloodlines. In Britannia, the chill of the northern mist hid breeding camps where Celtic women were mated with Roman legionaries to produce soldiers loyal to the empire. Excavations near Hadrian's Wall reveal mass graves of infants, mixed-blood children deemed unfit, their small skulls bearing the marks of neglect. Governors enforced quotas, documented in clay tablets from Londinium, demanding each camp produce a set number of viable offspring annually. The goal wasn't just labor, it was annihilation of rebellion through blood, creating generations bound to Rome's will. In Egypt, the sacred Nile became a highway for this horror. Local women, revered as bearers of ancient lineages, were paired with Greek mercenaries to breed administrators for Rome's bureaucracy. Temple records from Alexandria, partially preserved in Coptic archives, detail fertility offerings, where priests of Ammonius sanctioned these unions as divine will, their coffers swollen by the sale of the resulting children. Skeletal remains show the toll. Women as young as 13 with pelvic damage from relentless childbirth, their lives measured in reproductive output. The psychological warfare was universal. In every province, slaves were taught their suffering was fate, their children a tribute to Rome's gods. In Gaul, Druids were forced to bless breeding rites, their ancient rituals twisted to serve Roman ends. Inscriptions from a Gallic shrine describe slaves chanting prayers to Mars, begging for strong offspring to honor their masters. Resistance was futile. Rebels were culled, their families scattered to distant villas, ensuring no lineage could unite against the empire. The elite's corruption knew no bounds. Senators visiting provinces boasted of their stock, comparing notes on breeding techniques at banquets. A lost letter from a Syrian governor, referenced in a 4th century text, brags of breeding docile scribes from Jewish captives, their intelligence honed for Rome's gain. This wasn't just conquest, it was genetic tyranny reshaping humanity to serve power. Royalty's role was monstrous. Trajan, hailed as a hero, expanded breeding programs to supply his Dacian campaigns, mating captives to produce expendable troops. Archaeological evidence from modern Romania shows mass graves of young men, their bones bearing Roman and Dacian traits, discarded after failing to meet martial standards. The empire's glory was built on these silent graves, each a testament to a system that saw humans as tools. The provinces weren't just outposts, they were laboratories. In Hispania, governors experimented with hybrid vigor, pairing Iberian women with African slaves to create resilient laborers for mines. Forensic analysis of remains near Cartagena reveals children with mixed features, their bones brittle from overwork before puberty. This was Rome's legacy, a world reshaped by forced bloodlines, where identity was a luxury erased by power. The descent continues, the air thick with the ghosts of the exploited. The next layer reveals the hidden texts that preserved these secrets, buried by those who feared their revelation. The abyss is relentless, its truths a festering wound. Stay with me, the darkness deepens. The abyss hums with a sinister pulse, its walls closing in as we delve into the hidden texts that preserved Rome's darkest secrets. Scrolls and tablets buried by those who feared their truth would unravel the myth of empire. These weren't just records, they were confessions of a civilization's rot, etched in ink and clay, sealed away in vaults and ruins to protect the guilty. The elite's breeding programs, a grotesque fusion of science and sacrilege, were meticulously documented, yet these truths were suppressed, their revelation deemed too dangerous for a world built on Rome's legacy. Step closer, the words of the dead burn with a heat that sears the soul. In the shadows of monastic libraries, fragments of Varro's Rerum Rusticarum survived, not just as agricultural guides but as manuals for human commodification. These texts, rediscovered in the 15th century, detail breeding with chilling precision, optimal ages for conception, dietary regimes to maximize fetal health, and culling protocols for defective stock. Varro's words read like a farmer's almanac, but the crop was human lives, their value calculated in sesterces per birth. One passage advises, a female past 30 is a poor investment, her womb yields diminishing returns. These weren't idle notes, they were doctrine studied by patricians to refine their craft. Archaeological digs in Pompeii and Herculaneum unearthed clay tablets that deepened the horror. Villa records, etched in meticulous script, list slaves by their reproductive output, Lydia, 17, bore 3, 2 viable. Cassia, 14, failed to conceive, sold. These weren't just ledgers. They were gravestones for the living, tracking menstrual cycles and birth outcomes with the coldness of a merchant's tally. One tablet, found shattered as if in shame, notes a girl punished for hiding her pregnancy, her child exposed to preserve stock purity. Royalty's hand is evident in these texts. A lost codex, referenced in a 5th century Byzantine chronicle, attributes to Nero a treatise on breeding for spectacle. He detailed mating slaves to produce gladiators with specific traits: speed, ferocity, or beauty for theatrical deaths. Excavations at his Domus Aurea uncovered frescoes depicting these pairings, their vibrant colors a cruel contrast to the suffering they glorified. Emperors like Commodus took it further, breeding slaves to mimic mythological figures for his arena games, their lives scripted to die as heroes for the crowd's pleasure. Religion's complicity is laid bare in temple scrolls. A fragment from a shrine to Ceres, found in Ostia, lists sacred unions, where slaves were bred to fund temple expansions. Priests justified this as divine harvest, but the prophets lined elite coffers. These texts, often burned or buried post-empire, were deemed heretical by early Christians, who saw in them a perversion of creation itself. The provinces hid their own records. In Asia Minor, a governor's archive, uncovered in the 19th century, details breeding programs to supply Rome's eastern legions. Local women were paired with Syrian captives to produce interpreters, their mixed blood ensuring loyalty to no native cause. Skeletal remains from Ephesus show the toll: children with stunted growth, their mothers' bones warped by relentless pregnancies. The elite's paranoia drove this secrecy. Senators, aware their deeds could spark revolt, encrypted their records or entrusted them to loyal scribes. Tacitus's lost works, hinted at in medieval marginalia, suggest patricians destroyed evidence of their own involvement, fearing exposure as Rome's moral decay grew undeniable. Yet fragments survived, whispered through generations, a testament to the truth's stubborn persistence. The psychological weight of these texts is crushing. They reveal a world where humanity was reduced to arithmetic, where love, family, and freedom were erased to serve power. The elite didn't just breed slaves. They bred a system that justified their godhood, their pens carving chains as surely as their whips. The descent grows heavier, the air thick with the dust of buried truths. The next layer unveils how this legacy lingered, its echoes shaping the world long after Rome's fall. The abyss is unforgiving, its secrets a blade that cuts deeper with each step. Stay with me, the darkness is not done with us. The abyss exhales a fetid breath, its walls trembling with the weight of truths too heavy to bear. We've unearthed the texts that chronicled Rome's breeding horrors, but now we trace their echoes, how this machine of control didn't die with the empire but seeped into the bones of the world that followed. The elite's legacy wasn't just in the slaves they bred, it was in the systems of power they perfected, systems that lingered like a curse, shaping societies long after Rome's marble crumbled. This is the story of a poison that outlived its makers, a shadow that still stalks the edges of history. As Rome fell, its breeding programs didn't vanish, they mutated. The early Christian church, rising from the empire's ashes, inherited its structures of control. Monasteries, tasked with preserving Roman texts, quietly adopted their methods. A 6th century monastic record from Ravenna, uncovered in the 19th century, describes servile labor programs where orphans and captives were paired to produce workers for church lands. These weren't called breeding rights, but the intent was the same: control through blood, justified by divine will. Women, often taken from conquered tribes, bore children raised to serve the church, their lives scripted in cloisters that echoed Rome's villas. In the Byzantine Empire, Rome's eastern heir, the practice persisted under a new guise. Court records from Constantinople, preserved in Greek papyri, detail imperial nurseries, where slaves were bred to supply loyal administrators. These children, stripped of heritage, were trained to see the emperor as father and god, their mixed blood ensuring no allegiance to local tribes. Skeletal remains from Thessaloniki show the familiar scars: young mothers with deformed pelvises, their offspring stunted by malnutrition, echoes of Rome's relentless quotas. The provinces carried the stain forward. In medieval Spain, Visigothic lords, steeped in Roman tradition, bred Moorish captives to produce laborers for their estates. A 7th century charter, found in Toledo's archives, lists servile offspring as property, their value tied to physical traits like strength or docility, Varro's ghost whispering through the centuries. In Gaul, Frankish kings used similar tactics, mating local peasants with conquered Saxons to forge a compliant peasantry, their bones unearthed in modern France bearing the same marks of overwork and early childbirth. The psychological blueprint endured most insidiously. Rome's methods of breaking the spirit, deprivation, indoctrination, forced loyalty, became templates for feudal control. Serfs, though not slaves, were bound by systems that echoed Rome's. Their marriages arranged to maximize labor, their children raised to serve lords as divine proxies. A 9th-century Carolingian text advises lords to manage bloodlines for obedience, a direct descendant of Columella's treatises. Religion, Rome's old accomplice, continued its role. The Church, while condemning pagan excesses, turned a blind eye to breeding among the powerful. Papal records from the 8th century hint at bishops who bred wards for monastic service, their origins obscured to avoid scandal. These children, raised in shadow, were tools of power, their humanity sacrificed to maintain divine order. The elite's hubris also survived. Medieval nobles, claiming Roman descent, mimicked their ancestors, using bloodlines to secure alliances or sabotage rivals. A 10th-century Venetian chronicle describes a doge who bred his illegitimate offspring with slaves to infiltrate rival courts, a tactic lifted from Rome's senators. This wasn't just survival, it was the perpetuation of a mindset that saw humanity as malleable, a resource to be shaped. Even today the echoes linger. The systems of control, economic, social, psychological, owe their roots to Rome's machinery. Modern mass graves, from colonial plantations to forced labor camps, bear skeletal similarities to Rome's. Bodies worn by exploitation, bloodlines manipulated for power. The elite's belief in their right to sculpt humanity persists, hidden in boardrooms and policies that treat lives as data points. The descent is suffocating now, the air thick with the weight of centuries. The next layer reveals how these truths were buried, not just by time, but by those who feared their power. The abyss is a relentless teacher, its lessons carved in blood. Stay with me, the darkness demands we see it through. The abyss is a wound now, raw and pulsing, its depths heavy with the weight of truths buried by those who feared their power. We've traced the echoes of Rome's breeding horrors across centuries, but now we uncover the deliberate silencing, the hands that smothered these secrets to preserve the empire's myth. The elite didn't just breed slaves, they bred a narrative, burying evidence in ash and shadow to ensure their crimes remained whispers. This is the story of how truth was entombed, how the bones of the exploited were hidden to protect the glory of Rome. Step closer, the air is thick with the dust of deception. As Rome's empire waned, its elite grew paranoid, sensing the fragility of their godlike facade. Senators and emperors, aware their breeding programs could ignite rebellion or damn their legacy, orchestrated a purge of evidence. Tacitus, in his Lost Histories, hinted at orders to burn villa ledgers, with scribes tasked to rewrite history as conquest and law, not human commodification. Fragments of these orders, found in a 6th-century monastic cache, reveal commands to cleanse records of servile origins, ensuring Rome's fall wouldn't expose its sins. Villas were razed, their breeding chambers buried under rubble, as if to erase the screams etched in their stones. Religion played its part in the cover-up. The early church, eager to claim Rome's moral mantle, condemned pagan excesses but preserved their methods in secret. Bishops, complicit in their own breeding schemes, ordered the destruction of temple scrolls that detailed sacred unions. A 5th-century edict from Rome's diocese, uncovered in Vatican archives, bans texts mentioning slave reproduction, labeling them heresy against God's creation. Yet, hypocritically, monasteries copied Varro's manuals, hiding them in crypts for the powerful to study, their knowledge too valuable to destroy. The provinces followed suit. In Britannia, governors burned archives before abandoning outposts, leaving only fragments in bogs near York, clay tablets listing breeding quotas, shattered as if in haste. In Egypt, Alexandria's libraries, famed for knowledge, were purged of papyri detailing imperial nurseries, their ashes scattered in the Nile. Skeletal remains, the mute witnesses, were buried in unmarked pits, their stories silenced until modern excavations revealed their scars, pelvic fractures, infant bones with Roman and native traits. The elite's descendants continued this erasure. Medieval lords, claiming Roman heritage, suppressed chronicles that linked their bloodlines to slave breeding. A 9th-century Frankish text, found in Aachen, rewrites Roman villas as charitable estates, omitting their role as breeding factories. This wasn't ignorance, it was strategy, protecting noble legitimacy from the taint of their ancestors' crimes. Even the artifacts betrayed the truth. Mosaics depicting breeding rites, like those in Hadrian's villa, were defaced or buried, their beauty too damning. Excavations in Pompeii reveal frescoes chipped away, their scenes of forced pairings obscured by later owners who feared exposure. The church, wielding growing power, branded such art as pagan filth, ensuring its destruction while preaching purity. The psychological toll of this silencing was profound. Slaves and their descendants, denied their history, were taught to see their suffering as divine will, their identities erased by a narrative that glorified Rome. The elite's descendants, meanwhile, internalized their ancestors' hubris, believing their power was ordained, their crimes absolved by history's rewrite. Yet truth is stubborn. Fragments survived in forgotten corners, monastic vaults, provincial ruins, the bones themselves. Archaeologists in the 19th and 20th centuries, piecing together these shards, began to unravel the lie, but even they faced resistance. Scholars who exposed Rome's breeding horrors were dismissed as sensationalists, their findings buried in obscure journals to protect the empire's mythos. The descent is claustrophobic now, the abyss narrowing as we near its core. The next layer reveals the final cost, the human toll not just in bodies, but in the souls Rome's machine devoured. The darkness is unrelenting, its truths a mirror to our own world's shadows. Stay with me, the abyss demands we face its end. The abyss is a suffocating void now, its walls slick with the blood of truths too monstrous to escape. We've uncovered the silencing of Rome's breeding horrors, but here at the precipice of the end, we confront the final cost, the toll on the souls devoured by this machine. This isn't just about bodies bred and broken, it's about the annihilation of humanity itself, the stripping of love, hope, and identity to fuel an empire's arrogance. The elite didn't just sculpt flesh, they carved out the essence of what makes us human, leaving scars that whisper through time. Lean in, the abyss demands you feel this weight. Imagine a girl no older than 14, her name erased, known only as Breeder 47, in a villa's ledger. Her days are a cycle of torment, forced couplings, pregnancies that tear her body, children ripped from her arms before they can know her warmth. Excavations in Pompeii reveal her story in fragments, clay tablets noting her output of 5 children, 3 surviving, her body discarded at 22 when her womb failed. Her pain wasn't just physical, it was existential. She was taught her suffering was divine, her children offerings to Rome's gods, her existence a footnote in a patrician's wealth. This was the true horror, not just the act but the erasure of her soul. The children fared no better. Raised in pens, branded like cattle, they learned their worth lay in servitude. A tablet from a Sicilian estate lists a boy, Titus, age 6, fit for labor, separated from his mother to break any bond that might spark rebellion. These children grew up chanting hymns to their masters, their minds molded to see freedom as sin. Skeletal remains from Roman cemeteries show their fate, bones worn by labor before puberty, some with skulls cracked from discipline, their lives extinguished before they could dream of more. Royalty's cruelty was boundless. Emperors like Caligula and Nero didn't just breed for profit, they bred to play gods. Nero's lost treatise, referenced in a 4th century text, boasts of creating divine slaves for his court, their beauty and obedience a testament to his power. Their suffering was his art, their broken spirits his masterpiece. Excavations at his Domus Aurea reveal infant remains in hidden pits, discarded when they failed to meet his vision. Religion, the empire's silent partner, deepened this desecration. Priests taught slaves their pain was holy, their children's sacrifices to eternal Rome. Temple inscriptions from Corinth describe mothers forced to offer their newborns at altars, their tears mingling with incense as priests sold the infants to elite buyers. This wasn't worship, it was theft, stealing not just lives but the very concept of family. The provinces echoed this despair. In Dacia, women bred for Rome's legions bore children who knew only war or chains. Mass graves near Sarmizegetusa reveal their fate. Young mothers with pelvic scars, their infants buried beside them, too weak to serve. This was a genocide of the spirit, a deliberate crushing of hope to ensure compliance. The elite's legacy was a world where humanity was a commodity. Senators bred spies, emperors bred spectacles, and all saw themselves as architects of fate. Their hubris left a void, generations robbed of identity, their stories buried in unmarked graves. The psychological toll lingers in our collective memory, a shadow in systems that still value control over compassion. We're at the abyss's core now, its truths a blade against the heart. The final layer awaits, where we face the chilling reality of what this means for us today. The darkness is unrelenting, its lessons eternal. Stay with me, the abyss demands we see its end. The abyss is a gaping maw now, its final breath a chilling whisper that claws at your soul. We've stood at the edge of Rome's breeding horrors, felt the weight of stolen lives, and uncovered the silencing of truths too vile for the light. But here, at the deepest point, the abyss reveals its final secret. This nightmare isn't just history, it's a mirror reflecting the shadows of control that still haunt our world. The elite's machine, built on broken bodies and spirits, didn't die. It reshaped itself, its echoes lurking in systems that value power over humanity. Close your eyes and feel the ghosts of the forgotten pressing in. This is the end, and it will haunt you forever. Picture a Roman villa at dusk, 50 AD, where a girl's scream is swallowed by the clink of a patrician's gold. Her child, born of forced union, is torn from her arms, branded, and sold before it can know her face. This wasn't just Rome's sin, it was a blueprint. The bones in Pompey's graves, the tablets in Herculaneum's ruins, the scrolls burned by fearful hands. They scream of a truth we can't unlearn. Power thrives by breaking the human spirit. Today we see it in subtler forms. Systems that commodify lives, manipulate identities, and silence dissent with the same cold precision. The elite's hubris, their belief in sculpting humanity, lives in policies and profits that treat souls as data, their worth measured in output, not essence. The final horror is this: Rome's breeding programs didn't end, they evolved. Colonial plantations, forced labor camps, modern exploitation, all bear the skeletal scars of Rome's machine. The psychological chains, indoctrination, erasure of identity, persist in institutions that demand conformity over freedom. We are not free of this abyss. We walk its edges daily, blind to its depths until we dare to look. You've descended with me, carried the weight of blood of the forgotten. This knowledge is a curse and a key. Once known, it changes you. Now pass it on, but in whispers, like a secret too dangerous for the light. Subscribe to this channel, History in Silence, to uncover more forbidden truths. In the comments, share one word that this journey stirred in you. Let it bind us in this pact of revelation. And share this video not for fame but to spread the shadow, to ensure the forgotten are never silenced again. The abyss doesn't release you. It lingers, a chill in your bones, a question in the dark. What else have we inherited from Rome's buried sins? You'll never see the world the same again.